Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome into another YouTube live show. Tonight, I am John Kurtz. Thank you to everybody hanging out, waiting for me here today. I got a little creative for you today. First of all, very important topic that we need to get knocked out of the way, and that is the Big 12 going to get two teams into the college football playoff this year? Something that did not happen last year, something that I think needs to happen for the Big 12's sake, especially as we move into what looks like it could be a 5+11 college football playoff era. Now, we shall see on that. Obviously, with things back to square one on the negotiations there, we don't know where it is going to go, but the SEC is certainly preparing for that. And if the Big 12 wants to have any chance at getting multiple teams in once that happens, it would really behoove itself to start doing it this year. All right. But beyond that, I've got a hater's guide to the 2025 football season for you. How about that? Everybody loves hating these days. Even if you say you don't, you know that you do. That's half, I would say, the fun. Most of the time it's fun. Sometimes it gets a little carried away, but it's half the reason that people watch sports at this point is just to hate on their rivals, hate on other teams, hate on whoever it might be. So if you're looking for who to hate, where we're going to see the most hate in the college football season this year, I have put that together for you. You thought we could go an entire summer without talking about conference realignment? Well, think again, because right under our noses, right under our freaking noses, there has been a team spreading that they think they can get into the Big 12. There is a team pining to be in the Big 12 conference. I had not heard anything about it until actually I came across this last week, and I held on to it until now. But there are multiple articles in a major paper of record in a major market that have suggested that it's perhaps likely that this team winds up in the Big 12 at some point. Plus, BYU on the cusp of something really, really big this week, okay? And it plays right into the narratives that have been surrounding BYU, athletics as a whole, not necessarily just the football program, over the last month or so. So that's what I've got for you tonight. Appreciate everybody filing in. Please like the video. Please do subscribe to the channel. If you want to drop a question or comment in, join MC Gusto and the gang. MC Gusto. I want to make sure that I'm saying that correctly. Sorry, no Blink-182 shirt tonight. Just Kansas City versus everybody today from the Chiefs playoff run this year. But yeah, I have a bunch of Blink-182 shirts. You'll see another one soon. MC Gusto. It's really throwing me off there. I'm sorry. I've got a lot of band shirts that I could knock out here. So, you know, if you're a fan of pop punk or emo music, you can pick up on a lot of that throughout the show. Some nice Easter eggs there. Hey, if you want to make sure your question or comment makes it on tonight, click the $ below the chat box in order to do that. Appreciate everybody who does. Help support the channel that way. It is amazing. Even if you are not able to support that way, again, make sure you like and subscribe. That is totally free. And subscribe to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter at ofbnews.com. Another way to really get involved with what I'm doing. We are barreling toward 4,500 subscribers to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter. Appreciate everybody who's doing that. And John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo if you want to drop me a line there. I will kick off the next show with your question or comment if you do. So even if you're not able to be here live, you can still be a part of the show. I see TJ there. Nobody hates a team like fans of their own team at times. That is true. Ain't that the freaking truth, man? We all do a great job at hating our own teams. And that's when I say like hating is really half the reason that we're here to watch college sports, and it's sports in general, but I think almost college sports probably lends itself toward it a little bit more. It may be more than half of it when you consider the amount of hate that goes into your own team. And whether that's coming from a place of like legitimate anger, or sometimes it's like reverse psychology, right? You're trying to do the Michael Scott thing. Like, oh man, if I just act really pessimistic, keep my expectations low, like hate on these guys all the time, then hey, when things that are good happen, then it's like a bonus for me. You know, I think there's like kind of like a defense mechanism to a lot of that, dissecting the psychology of sports fans. Anyway, I could do that for a while. Let's have a fun show, shall we? Start with this. Big 12 going to get two teams in the playoff this year. I would say last year the Big 12 came arguably closer to getting 0 teams in the playoff than 2. And I'm not saying that's right. I'm not saying that's fair. I do think that was the reality. And that has to change this year, right? I certainly think it does. And I'm going to tell you why for a bunch of reasons here. Outside of just the obvious, you want more teams in the playoff than not, more money for the league, yada, yada, yada. There's a lot of reason to say that it matters quite a bit. And it really is easy to forget how well Arizona State performed in the college football playoff as we get further away from it and more of this conversation centers around the future of the playoff. And the Big 12 just doesn't seem to have a whole lot of respect in this national conversation. Even though it was reported that Brett Yormark started the 5+11, the only conversation there has been about slamming the Big 12 for potentially locking itself out of getting more teams into the playoff without acknowledging how gutsy, how principled of a stance it is, and the real reason that it's being done. You're not getting much respect at all for the Big 12 here and how they're operating. And oh, by the way, again, if you could, it's like share. If I could turn back time, if you could just turn back time and get a 4th and 13 freaking stop from Arizona State to have won the Peach Bowl against Texas this year in the quarterfinals of the college football playoff. I mean, these conversations could be a lot different. Like one play really changes narratives. And the same thing can be said for that Houston basketball game, right? If you just get to go back and change 2 plays, you can have a national championship at hoops this year and then a college football playoff win over Texas. Maybe these combos would be different. But there's not a lot of talk about that. And in fact, I would argue the ACC got more juice from sending 2 teams to the playoff and performing objectively worse, one against the exact same team that Arizona State played. They got more juice out of that than the Big 12 actually got out of damn near winning a game and performing very well. Instead, you had to deal with half the season last year, the Big 12 fighting this narrative battle of it was Boise for a lot of it because it seemed like at one point in time there it was that was the battle for the bye, right? It was going to be until the ACC fell out because of the way things broke at the end of the year. And with the championship game, it was who's going to get that 4th bye. And it was, well, Boise is better. And it turned into this debate that, frankly, I kind of hate. It's one that the SEC and Big Ten love because they're causing all these problems and they just get to watch the minions fight amongst each other. And so they got to watch Big 12 fans and Boise fans duke it out, which we didn't need any of that. But you see why it happened, because there was a threat there that the Big 12 wouldn't get a bye. And Boise did wind up with the 3 seed as opposed to Arizona State at the 4 seed. Then you entered a couple weeks where you're having to even defend the Big 12's honor against freaking Tulane and Army. No offense to those two, but they had come into the picture as oh, wow, could they actually be the 5th highest ranked conference champ and keep the Big 12 champ out of this thing? That's what you spent a lot of last season doing instead of, hey man, maybe Arizona State's actually pretty good. Maybe Arizona State is going to put together the best performance out of anybody not from the Big Ten, SEC, or Notre Dame in the college football playoff. There was no conversation about that. And there's not much conversation about it now that we are that far removed from it. So this is all part of why I think it's very important this year for the Big 12 to get multiple teams in. And I feel like I heard Josh Pate, my guy, I heard him say on his latest show, he gets really mad when people misquote him. So let me state, I believe his belief was that the Big 12 had a decent chance at getting multiple teams in this year. Okay. That is my perception, that people out there feel there is a better chance of that this year than last year. Now, remember last year at this time, a lot of the buzz was about Utah, K-State, Oklahoma State, really at the top of the league, who were 3 pretty known brands, known commodities, somewhat trusted commodities, even by college football elitists out there, and trusted commodities, at least relative to the rest of the Big 12. Okay. I'll say it that way, relative to the rest of the Big 12. So can the league, even if it is, just get 2 teams in, have them both lose, although it'll be a little bit different this year. You'll be playing first-round games. I guess you could argue in a way that's easier, possibly an easier opponent, but you will be on the road. So maybe I'll just keep that statement there the same. ACC had to play 2 road games. At least it was a neutral site game for Arizona State. You get 2 teams in playing road games. Even if you lose them, it seemed like the ACC really benefited from having multiple selections. couple of points here. The ACC also had a third team. It is fair to mention they had a third team that was close. Miami was very, very close. And then Clemson and Miami, two of the three teams involved here, were very high-profile brands. So that obviously makes a difference too. They are brands that are just going to draw more attention. They are in the ACC. They consistently recruit at a really, really high clip, which is going to keep them in more of those conversations. So that is a piece of it too. But the Big 12 can still really help itself, really, really help itself if they get two teams in. So how is that going to happen this year? How would that happen this year? For starters, we can't do this. When I say we, the Big 12 cannot do this. Flip the standings upside down, flip the Big 12 preseason poll upside down, and have that be the order of finish at the end of the year. Cannot have that happen, because that was a massive problem for the Big 12 last year. I just said you had these trusted brands in Utah, Oklahoma State, K-State. They did not perform the way that they were expected to, and now all of a sudden, it was kind of like, instead of getting Lucky Charms and Fruit Loops, you're getting the stuff on the bottom shelf it's the generic stuff with a weird name. Like, people didn't trust it quite as much. Like, what is this? Could it possibly be as good? Even if they are as good or better, sometimes you find a generic thing at the grocery store that's actually better. And that was Arizona State last year. It was actually probably better than you would have expected Utah, K-State, or Oklahoma State to have been at the beginning of the year. But people didn't trust it. Nobody trusted it because it's the, Maltos instead of Fruit Loops or whatever at the bottom shelf, and they're not in the bright, shiny box that you're used to from Kellogg's. So the Big 12 needs to have some established brands here, or at least teams that are perceived to be good going into the season. And that's why, I will start with Arizona State here if we're going to talk about teams that would need to be involved here. Like, Arizona State, I think, is number one here. And fair to say, number one with a bullet, seeing as last year they were an afterthought. Last in the league, nobody thinking about them, nobody thinking about their program. How could they make up that much ground in 1 year? Well, as I mentioned, you saw what they did last season. They then kept the coaching staff intact. They kept the high-profile players. Yes, they lose Scadaboo to the draft, but they keep the high-profile players on the rest of the roster. They keep Sam Levitt away from Oregon. They have a young, charismatic coach that everybody really likes, just creating a lot of buzz. There has been a lot of equity and buzz built up at Arizona State over the last year, and that is extremely valuable. Nobody is going to be surprised if Arizona State is a team at the end of the year that looks like they're going to win the Big 12 and be in contention for a playoff spot here, or, perhaps get the automatic bid. Nobody will be surprised. I mean, I've seen them as high as like 12 or 13 in some preseason top 15s. So they have the juice. Arizona State has the juice, even though there was literally none at this time last year. I would still say Utah is definitely in this conversation as a team that has so much residual brand value from what they did go into a couple of Rose Bowls, winning the Pac-12 2 of the last 3 years that they were there, right? The back-to-back seasons. And that still carries. People know Kyle Whittingham. They know he's a Hall of Fame head coach. People know about the quarterback injury stuff. Utah, not only those 2 appearances at the end there, but they, Whittingham winning basically 9 games every single year for the better part of 2 decades leading up to the conclusion of their time in the Pac-12. There's a lot of brand value built up in the Utes. So I think they would still count here, even if, when the Big 12 preseason poll comes out, it'll be very interesting to see where they wind up. I would think they may be more like 5, 6, 7, somewhere in that range. But I think they're still high enough and still have enough behind them that would be fine. Baylor or TCU, I think Baylor especially probably is going to be like top 4, top 5 in the preseason poll. And they're a little under the radar in terms of what this team is, because they surged at the back half of last year after everyone had really written them off and everyone saw the Hail Mary in Boulder. And it looked like at that point, Dave Aranda was going to be fired. There was the victory cigar thing after the game where he talked about how that was the formation they used that got burned on the Hail Mary. And everybody's like, oh, man, this guy's cooked. And so no one really paid attention to the improvement that they made in the emergence of Sawyer Robertson. But I think enough people who really pay attention to college football do know. And Baylor has been very successful at a high level within the last, 10 years with multiple coaches. So I think Baylor's still got enough. TCU, yes, the Georgia game hurts, but I mean, they won a playoff game in the 4-team playoff era, right? I mean, that should garner them a lot of respect there. They have the highest talent composite in the Big 12. I'll include K-State in this group. I just mentioned Athlon had K-State at number 13 in the country. A lot of people really do like Chris Kleiman's program, which has won 9+ games in 3 straight seasons, including a Big 12 title. So they've been consistently competing for a Big 12 championship. I think there's a belief there, especially with a player of Avery Johnson's talent level. I'll say that instead of caliber necessarily right now, but his talent level, people see the upside. This one's not really fair, but I would put Colorado in the group of like teams that, they can be involved here. Like Colorado can be involved here. They have probably not really earned that necessarily, especially replacing this year the star power that they are. But they're still a draw. Dion is still a draw. Caden Salter is a high-profile name at quarterback. Or Julian Lewis. I mean, that's an even bigger name in terms of just name value if he's going to be the guy that actually wins the starting job. Colorado's still a lightning rod enough of one that I think they would really get benefit of the doubt. If they're going to win the league or be in contention for an at-large spot, they would have some real juice there. Interesting ones to me on how much these would really fit in. BYU, interesting case as to whether or not they would qualify as like teams established enough or highly thought of enough to get serious at-large consideration. BYU did not. It was a total crock last year that they did not get enough respect there and wind up finishing 17th in the final college football playoff poll. That was ridiculous. They were in the national spotlight last year for as deep into the season as they went unbeaten. But how does that translate now to this year? Do people really respect that, or is it going to be more the narrative last year of like, this team's really not that good, just wait for them to lose? We're just waiting for them to lose. The clock will strike midnight at some point here. The other problem that BYU has is, will Jake Retzloff play? And not purely from a, hey, obviously he's going to help you win games standpoint, but from a, if Jake Retzloff is not playing, that probably hurts the perception of what BYU is. Like, people will be like, well, this is a backup quarterback. If a backup quarterback is running through the Big 12 here, and we already thought BYU wasn't good last year with the guy Retzloff that they thought was better than whoever this is playing, how can this team really be that good? You might be fighting a little bit of that. We shall see. Iowa State. I mean, Iowa State should get the respect. They've played in a couple Big 12 championship games now since the pandemic, right? That was the 2020 season. Since the pandemic, they've been in a couple of Big 12 championship games. I think Matt Campbell is pretty widely respected. They've had some very good teams. Well, 2 very good teams, and then a couple solid teams and 1 bad team in that time span. But I can't get the Paul Feinbaum clip stuck out of my head or out of my head, like unstuck. It's on a loop where he was just like, it was 2021, I believe, when Iowa State really didn't live up to the hype. They had Brock Purdy and Breece Hall, Charlie Kolar, like that whole team coming back, and they only went 7-6. And I can remember early in the year, Paul Feinbaum going on a rant about like, I will never trust Iowa State again because they burned me here when you all were trying to tell me this was a good team. I wonder if there are some that are a little more along those lines. Iowa State's probably fine, but we'll see. To me, there's still like a weird thing with their national perception. And I'm not saying it is correct or right. And maybe I'm focusing too much on Paul Feinbaum and whatever his influence would be. But that's kind of the list. Like, teams that I think would be no problem if they're the ones up there in the conversation at the end of the year. And then teams that are kind of borderline, and the rest, that's where I think you would really start to have some trouble in terms of what the perception would be. And you could run into a situation like last year. You definitely could. So please do keep the comments coming, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Appreciate everybody who does that. Subscribe to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter at ofbnews.com. That is ofbnews.com. And let's see. We've got a super chat. If you want to be like Kim here and drop in a super chat, you can click the $ below the chat box in order to do so. Appreciate everybody who does that. Kim says, John, are you going to Big 12 Media Days? If so, I look forward to meeting you. I will be at Big 12 Media Days. Yes, I will be on Radio Row at Big 12 Media Days. Looking forward to that, July 8th and 9th in Dallas. So, or I guess maybe I should just say DFW. With the Star again. I don't remember that. It's back at the Star. Anyway, I'll be in the DFW area. Yes, Kim, come say hi. Would love to meet you. And same goes for anybody else who's going to be there at Big 12 Media Days. Very, very much looking forward to that. Had a really good time in Vegas last year, but I'm much more comfortable at the Cowboys facilities. Been to so many Big 12 media events, championship games, a Cotton Bowl. K-State randomly playing Stanford at a non-con game there. I've just spent so much time around there that feels much more natural than Vegas did, even if it was fun. But yes, we're getting close, everybody. Once we get there, that's a really nice spike to the content in the middle of the summer, and it gets you feeling like you're back close. And about the time that high wears off, the calendar flips to August, and then you can really start to feel it. Okay. Like I said earlier, hating is like 75% of the reason that we watch college football. It may not be the most healthy thing in the world, but if you look at the environment, college football is all about rivalries. How much you hate your rival, how much you want to go to work and be able to talk smack around the water cooler, or these days, more like you want to be able to log on to Twitter or Facebook or whatever it might be, and you want to fire off a shot at your rival or the buddy or your cousin, friend, whatever it might be. Okay? So I'm giving you a hater's guide to the 2025 college football season. To me, I'm giving you a top 5 and some honorable mentions of who will be the most hated entities in college football this year. This will have a slight Big 12 tint to it. Like for Big 12 fans, these will be the most hated entities, generally speaking. Obviously, I know that like Baylor fans are going to hate TCU. That's probably not going to be the case across the league widespread. I think you'll understand once I start getting going with this list. But a lot of these really apply nationally too. I think especially number 1. If you stick around for number 1 is something that I don't know if everybody has considered this, how bad this is going to be this year for everybody. Not just Big 12 fans, but everybody is going to get really sick of the number 1 most hated thing this year. Here's honorable mentions though, okay? Colorado. Colorado is still a lightning rod, perhaps a little bit less so just because I think the attention will dip on them slightly with Bill Belichick here. Bill Belichick and Jordan Hudson, excuse me. Certain people, though, are always going to hate Colorado. They have a faction, a fan out there that is just going to hate the way Deion operates, hate the way that program is run. Last year, I think it was really hate like Shedeur Sanders in particular. Kind of hard to hate Travis Hunter, but hate how Shedeur Sanders conducted himself, which I think is pretty unfair. But there was all of that. You're going to get that. And then you're just going to get the Deion fans, like the Deion hive, the people who are not Colorado fans, who don't really have a great grasp on the intricacies of college football, but are just there to be Deion fans, which is fine. And I'm all for the sport having more casual fans, right? I mean, these are the casuals. Bring them in. Have them watch the Big 12. That's awesome. Big 12 needs that. That's why you need those big TV numbers that Colorado puts up. But that doesn't mean that those fans can't get very annoying. They can. So Colorado is still going to be there. Probably not as strongly hated as last year, I would imagine. But we'll see. If they win games, if they win 9 games again, it'll be hot and heavy. SMU makes my honorable mention list. They were already a very annoying online fan base. This is a pretty online one. Okay, but SMU was pretty yappy once they joined the ACC, wanting to flaunt all the money that SMU donors have, and that was going to be able to buy them whatever they wanted. Now they jumped into the Power 4, and they were telling everybody who would listen how great that was going to be for them. They've got all this money. You're poor. Blah, 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 blah. And I thought, well, this will just be a cute little thing. BYU then beats SMU early on in the year. Big 12 gets its moment, and all SMU does is go on to then make the playoff. And so now you've got that SMU fan base armed with a playoff season. Look, that's going to be way worse if you're TCU for sure, or even Baylor, Tech, schools that are in Texas around there. But, boy, can imagine SMU is probably going to be a pretty annoying fan base if they have another really successful season. Finally, Honorable mention. I think I speak for everybody outside of SEC country when I say Ole Miss. I say Ole Miss here, and it's because of just how wild Lane got on Twitter. I mean, Lane has just become insufferable, and I'm a guy who enjoys Lane. I think and I still do to an extent. I think he's a good character for the game. I think the game is better, the sport is better when you have great characters, people that love to hate, all of that. You need those type of people there. But man, would it be nice to see Ole Miss go 7-5 and not even have a chance to complain about the playoff, though Lane Kiffin would probably find a way to still tweet snarky things about the college football playoff selection committee during the playoff, even if Ole Miss went 7-5. All right, we've arrived at number 5. This one's pretty specific to the Big 12, I will admit, but it's your number 2 G5 contender. This is piggybacking off of the conversation I had earlier in the show tonight about how last year you spent half the season arguing with people about Boise and the merits of who should get the final bye. And then it turned into, wow, now you've got to defend yourself even against whoever the number 2 G5 contender is. The bye thing won't matter this year because, unfortunately, the Big 12, ACC, G6, they all gave in and just said, fine, we'll just take the top 4 teams and give them a bye. They acquiesced on that, which I didn't love, but they did. So now it'll be all about once a second G5 contender comes in. I mean, hopefully the Big 12 won't have to deal with as much of it this year if some of the favorites do perform well. But I think even if they do, you're still going to have some crowd of people like, oh, man, I don't know. What do you guys think? Like, hey, James Madison, should we be pushing James Madison instead of a Big 12 champion here to be the 5th highest ranked conference champ? Should we do that? Should we get 2 G5s in there? It's going to create some hate, some weird battles, just like last year for a time. It was like I'm on Twitter I'm like, why? I really don't want to be having to like slam Tulane here. I really don't want to be having to slam Army, our nation's armed forces. I don't want to have to do that, but I'm being forced to do that because of these ridiculous playoff discussions. Number 4 most hated. This one is at number 4 for Big 12 fans. It would be number 2 probably on the list overall if you're talking about college football at large, but it's the SEC in general. Just the SEC. We're going to get a little more granular and specific on the SEC later, but the SEC in general, completely insufferable during the 1 year last year where they didn't get just over-the-top preferential treatment from the college football playoff selection committee, like not just egregious preferential treatment. They instead got, I would still argue, preferential treatment by even having Alabama and Ole Miss considered as much as they were for the final at-large spot, despite having 3 losses and losing 2 horrible teams, the likes of Oklahoma and Kentucky. Man, I mean, it was crazy to the point where not only, I mean, the Lane Kiffin tweets were one thing. The SEC media mafia and the fanboys online are another thing. The millions of hypothetical wins that the SEC picked up in the month of November and December, the months of November and December last year, that's one thing. But how about now we've got Greg Sankey saying, man, ESPN FPI, we need to get all these numbers and only let those numbers. Strength of schedule, I need guarantees on how you guys are going to weigh strength of schedule here with this. It's like, man, they are going to all-out war over this literally 1 year after Alabama got into the 4-team field over unbeaten ACC champ Florida State. Like, it's amazing how much the spoiled child was not able to handle not getting the toy that it demanded right that second for once. So I think everybody, I speak for the entire college football world, except for the southeastern portion of the United States, everybody would be very happy to see the SEC struggle, and we'll be hating on the SEC like crazy this year. You know, Big Ten probably even a little more irked with the SEC now than normal because they can't agree on a playoff format, and the SEC was sort of the fly in the ointment on that after Brett Yormark first pitched 5+11. Number 3, as we get a little bit more Big 12 specific, number 3 to me is Nebraska. Nebraska, I feel like, even as I'm doing this, I admit I probably should have had SEC over Nebraska. Maybe this one got a little bit too personal for me, but I love taking digs at the Huskers, who really got this party started of Big 12 exodus back in the 2010 conference realignment wave, right? very, very enjoyable to see Nebraska go a decade without making a bowl game. They finally got back there last year. They're 7-6. They have not finished the season ranked since 2012, which is pretty amazing. And that was at number 25 in the country. They have fallen on tough times. And you might say, well, Matt Rule seems like a likable coach. I don't know. I went into last year thinking that. I don't know, man. Matt Rule is starting to get very annoying, particularly the press conference comments he made about Iowa State. He's getting his butt kicked in recruiting by the Cyclones in state. Dropped a comment insinuating like, well, they're Iowa State, we're Nebraska. We got to be more careful. When you're a program that consistently wins 4 or 5 games a year, you've got to be really, really discerning and careful about who it is that you're bringing into your program. That clearly matters when you're a program of that caliber. It's quite annoying. And I think for Big 12 fans who had to deal with Nebraska's attitude in the Big 12, everything that was happening in the 90s when they were really killing everybody, like they were the power, shared that mantle with Oklahoma for a lot of those years in the Big 8, but the Big 12, dude, in the 90s, Nebraska, totally insufferable. It's great to watch them become a bottom-tier Power 4 team that is now being made fun of by Vandy. I love it. Oklahoma's number 2. Should be no real surprise who's 2-1 here. Oklahoma's number 2. I still blame Texas more. I think most Big 12 fans would for the exodus of the Big 12 that started everything in 2021, kicked off that round of realignment. But still, a lot of Oklahoma talk about how lowly this conference was. They just dominated it every year, which they generally did. But to see Oklahoma struggle last year in the SEC was quite delightful. They go 3 straight years without making the Big 12 championship game at the end of their tenure in the league, and then go 2-6 in their first year with the big boys in the SEC. That was pretty chef's kiss. Brent Venables still floundering here. Would be great to see that continue. Although the one caveat to that I will say is if they fire Brent Venables, I think the odds of them getting a better head coach are pretty high. Pretty high. But for me, still a lot of animosity toward Oklahoma. Very easy to root against the Sooners. Number 1, and guys, I'm telling you, I don't know that we've considered how annoying this is going to get this year. Maybe other people, there's been more talk about this, and I just haven't noticed it. This is probably something that in a world where we didn't have conference realignment, or in this case, playoff, and these big picture, like college football things to be worrying about in the offseason, we would talk a lot more about this. But get ready for Arch Manning in Texas being Tim Tebow in Florida this year. I mean, I opened Athlon, the preview magazine, earlier today. I was hanging out by the pool, just doing a little bit of reading. And man, I mean, it was like every other page at the beginning of that. The forward to the entire issue included a couple of paragraphs about Arch Manning from the guy who's just like explain, like, hey, thanks for buying this. We're going to get some Tim Tebow effect here with Arch Manning. People are not going to shut up about him now that he is actually playing and is the starting quarterback at Texas. It's going to be out of control. Texas is already very hateable. It's already very annoying to deal with Texas as much as we all have to. Imagine now that they have a Manning playing quarterback, and there's been all this Arch buildup for so long. You talk about casuals coming into the game. You're going to get the casuals, who become Arch fans just because of what his last name is. You throw that all on top of just Texas being Texas, who they are, how much Big 12 fans absolutely hate the Longhorns for everything that Texas put the Big 12 through while generally underachieving in the conference and then leaving. Yeah, Texas takes the top spot. This is a great year. If you hate Texas, you want to be a Texas hater, this is an outstanding Texas hating year. All right. So get ready for that. Make sure you get your Twitter fingers ready, fire up your drafts, whatever it is that you need to do to get prepared to hate on Texas this year. Everybody, not just in the Big 12, everybody. Okay. Looks like we got another super chat from Justin. If you want to be like Justin, click the $ below the chat box in order to submit a super chat. Appreciate everybody who does that. Justin says, I want UCF to go 6-6 and lose all 6 games by a score and in strange ways. Fumble return for a touchdown, pick 6, safety, muffed field goal for a TD, etc. That's pretty good, Justin. That's good hating right there, man. We're talking about being being a good hater in college football, that's a particularly painful way to do it. Maybe you could even say like 5-7 if you wanted them to go 5-7 and just barely like miss the bowl game at the end of the year. That's the only thing I would argue, Justin. Maybe go 5-7 instead of 6-6 if you really want to dig at your rival. But I like that. Instead of just getting like blown out, have it be like a really painful kind of Nebraska. I mean, what you're basically hoping for there, Justin, is for UCF to have a Nebraska season. And you know what's funny about that, Justin? You know what's funny about that? Seems like there might be a connection there between UCF and Nebraska when we talk about them being someone who could potentially lose in weird, zany ways, painstakingly close every single week. And that would be the man that they just hired as their head coach, Scott Frost, who I think was more skilled, more adept at doing exactly that, losing in excruciating ways. I think he was better at that than anybody I've ever seen at the Power 4 level during his time at Nebraska. So look, UCF fans, it could be very, very different. All right. It could be very, very different. But I'm just saying, the way Justin sets this up, that does click on in my brain like, oh, yeah, Scott Frost was horrific in close games. Horrific in close games at Nebraska. Anyway, thanks for being a good hater, Justin. Thank you for being here. See, Justin does say, no, I want them to go to a bowl game. Okay. All right. All right. Fair enough. Fair enough. Boy, chat. Let's keep it PG in the chat, please. Okay. If we could do that, that would be awesome. I promise you guys, this was not something that I wanted to. I felt like I saw a second column come out about this, and I felt like I had to bring it to your attention. Okay. Just when you think you've got conference realignment all shot down and we're not going to be talking about it for an off season, and it's really ACC settlement happened, everybody's like, all right, don't really have to deal with this until like 2030 when that ACC exit fee goes way down. But now we've got to talk about it because of one school who refuses to let the conversation die, and they're talking about joining the Big 12. So one school is keeping this conversation alive, this conference realignment conversation. As I said, you got this ACC settlement that really, no pun intended, settled everything down. Florida State and Clemson had been seemingly hell-bent on bullying their way out of the conference, even if it meant that they had to go Kool-Aid Man style and just run through the brick wall and say, oh, yeah, and then get out of there. Felt like that's what was going to happen until suddenly there are some concessions made. You got the brand initiative. You got success initiatives. There's enough of a case there to keep them there until the exit fee would then drop once everybody thinks there will be a lot of movement at the end of the decade. Change the calculus on lots of this, because even if you're talking about Big 12 expansion or realignment, it was all tied to what could happen in the ACC, which would have been started at the top by your Florida State, Clemson, Miami, North Carolina type of group. That now no longer looks like it's anything that's on the table here. So I am not teasing out this segment to say, hey, it's some ACC team that is sitting here saying, oh, yeah, we would love to be in the Big 12. I think that will happen. And when I say team, I mean, these are not direct statements coming from the team. But when you consider the source here, who I will get to in just a moment, it sure seems like something like internally at the athletic department of the school is really trying to push this message of like, hey, keep this out there. Keep this out there that we could be a member of the Big 12. All right. It's not Louisville. It's not Pitt. Okay. It's more in the realm of a Gonzaga or a UConn. And in fact, probably like a diet UConn, I would say. All right. Far from the pipe dream, some Big 12 fans might have. You hear the conversation. Everyone's like, well, would Nebraska want to come back? Like, look, guys, no, nobody's coming back. Nobody's coming back. We're talking about UNLV. We're talking about UNLV. Okay. And I know a lot of you are just like, okay, John, like you're rolling your eyes at me. Like, why even bring this up? I do get it. I do understand. I kind of did that when I first saw one of these columns that mentioned this from the Las Vegas Review-Journal. But it's the big paper in Vegas. I assume that's the paper of record in Vegas, I believe. Las Vegas Review-Journal. Ed Graney is a columnist there, and he's the one that's been pushing this a couple of times. I think it was Rick Jr. on Twitter. Give him a shout out. I believe it's Rick Jr. If I got that wrong, I apologize. But I saw he had tweeted out some screenshots of things that Graney had been saying here. And I went back and found some of those columns and was like, oh, wow, like UNLV really seems serious about this, that they think they've got a legit shot at the Big 12. Here's a column that he wrote just about a month ago. Says it has again brought up the idea of UNLV one day making a home in a Power 4 conference. It has again broached the question of whether it's a realistic goal, and it is. That's a new paragraph, standalone paragraph of 3 words, and it is. So he really seems to think that is a possibility. He says there's a growing sentiment around UNLV that landing in such a spot as, say, the Big 12 could occur sooner rather than later. Now, that is vague, but that sure sounds like not talking about waiting 5 years to the end of the decade kind of a thing. UNLV could land in a spot like the Big 12 sooner rather than later. Boy, boy, boy. Okay. Let's read on here, folks. It certainly helps that UNLV now has a legitimate football program in which to feature any sort of argument toward inclusion. I mean, we got to define legitimate there, all right? And I didn't set out here to just destroy UNLV football, but you can't just slap together a couple of nice seasons under Barry Odom, which, yeah, last year they won 11 games, went 11-3, won the LA Bowl, and then they won 9 games and went to the Guaranteed Rate Bowl. Before that, that's nice, but man, before that, 5-7, 2-10, 0-6, 4-8, 4-8, 5-7, 4-8, 3-9, 2-11. Like there's nothing. There's one bowl game in about 23 years before the last 2 years. Okay, so like I don't think having 2 nice years with Barry Odom and then hiring a former SEC coach and Dan Mullen makes it a legitimate football program. But I digress. That's the narrative. That's the narrative from UNLV being pushed here. Barry Odom, I'm reading back from the column now. Barry Odom brought the team to historic levels before departing for Purdue, and it's expected Mullen can follow with just as good or even better product. Football is king. It's a significant step for UNLV. That for decades it was an eyesore. The Big 12 would see this vast improvement as a major piece to the puzzle when deciding whether or not UNLV is a good fit. There was some talk about facilities. There was some talk about it being the sports capital of the world, which that part looked to me like that's the column. Hey, it's the sports and entertainment capital of the world. Brett Yormark loves things like that. He moved Big 12 Media Days last year to Vegas simply because of that. As a marketing guy thinking about global brands and pushing the Big 12 brand as much as possible, having a school in Vegas could be attractive to him. I think like that's your column, but then it's like, okay, but that makes sense. Nice headline. That's a good facade. What's actually in there? It feels to me a little bit like those like, I'm thinking of the movie, The Interview, right? Where they're like in North Korea and there's just like it looks like there's all these great buildings, but then when you actually get close to it, it's just like a cardboard cutout. There's nothing actually in there. And that's a nice front. It's a nice facade, but where's the substance in there? Just a couple of years and then hiring Dan Mullen. I don't think that's really the substance. Yormark loves basketball. What has UNLV basketball really been for a while? It talks about UNLV's top tier research institution, a medical school, and a law school, which, great. Those are very nice sprinkles on top of a cupcake. If you're talking about adding a team to a conference, it's by no means, again, the substance that is going to get you in there. Shout out to Eric Harper. He's the athletic director at UNLV. He played football at K-State back in the early Bill Snyder days. That's basically the case being made here. Anybody convinced that this is a good ad? Now, if UNLV rips off, here's what I would say back. I don't mean to be too flippant here and too just like mean to a school that I'm sure really wants to get in. I would just say that's some real ballsy confidence to be talking about. We think this could happen sooner rather than later when, I mean, like Brett Yormark tried really hard to get UConn. That came up multiple times to get UConn, who has the best basketball program in the country. Something Yormark loves, an initiative of his clearly, is to break off the basketball media rights, sell them separately. That is a big, big thing. And he's got the best of the best there. And UConn football has been a little bit better now with Jim Mora, right? Not quite the eyesore that it was before. And with that incredible basketball program, there was no movement there, no juice for it. Gonzaga, a little bit different. Obviously, I mean, they don't have football, but another thing Brett Yormark couldn't push through. So you think then they're going to be able to push through UNLV and split that pie another way in terms of the money that you're dividing when we're talking about the Big 12 might need to go private equity to bring enough money into the conference right now to keep up with everybody? You're going to split that pie then another way and take money away from schools to bring in UNLV? To me, this is just like the say it out loud test, man. Say it out loud test. That doesn't make much sense. Here's how I would level. If UNLV suddenly becomes like Boise, they go on like a Boise run, make a playoff, win a game, have your Fiesta Bowl moment like Boise did against Oklahoma way back when. If that happens and Dan Mullen really is a superstar there, I guess maybe then we're talking. That would be back-to-back coaches that were good hires. Maybe you're looking at that saying, hey, facilities are better, resources are there to still be pretty competitive. I mean, I don't know. I think there's a lot of work to do. But I keep reading. I'm not even done with the column. Here's another line from it. The Big 12 whispers continue to grow louder behind the scenes. So what UNLV did was make in its mind the best possible deal with the Mountain West until such would possibly become reality. So they're making the point, basically, they didn't go to the Pac-12. They stuck it out in the Mountain West because they're waiting for the Big 12, which, hey, I mean, that I don't really blame them for that, but I don't know, man. I would put the odds of this in a pretty similar spot to like, I sit here and think, hey, I really want Project Rudy to happen. And there maybe you can see like the path maybe to how you would get there, but I don't think it's overwhelmingly likely at all. Kind of the same thing here for a UNLV Big 12 inclusion at some point. But you know what? If we go to Project Rudy, 70 teams are getting included. Okay, so maybe that'll happen for UNLV. Maybe that will happen. Anyway, my thoughts on that. Please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel. Make sure you sign up for the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter at ofbnews.com. Join nearly 4,500 Big 12 fans who subscribe to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter that you get to your inbox twice a week, totally for free. We appreciate everybody who does all of that. And John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo, if you want to drop me a question or comment there, I will kick off the next show with it. And if you want to do it right now here on the live show, just click the $ below the chat box to submit a super chat. Appreciate everybody there. One final thing here. So big week in Provo. A 5-star quarterback who some say is the best in the country. I saw an analyst at 24/7 Sports who could commit to BYU on Tuesday. And there's actually quite a bit of reason to believe that like BYU may legitimately pull this off. And if you're a fan of another school in the Big 12, you should be paying a lot of attention to this. Pay attention to what is happening in Provo with the way that they are really changing the way that they recruit, based, you'd have to assume, in large part on the amount of money available, but just a different strategy shift here for BYU. And this is very important timing-wise for a lot of reasons too. Okay, so this quarterback is Ryder Lyons. Oregon is the primary competition right now. There was a USC visit scheduled at one point. Believe that did get canceled, even though his brother plays at USC. So that seems to be a good sign. Ryder Lyons just took a visit to BYU this past weekend. And I did see on Twitter today, thank you for those who put this out there, he had a nice little TikTok in the locker room putting on a BYU uniform. Okay, so I'm not a kid anymore, in my mid-30s. I don't know what the kids would say about that, but that seems like a positive sign. If he's out there making TikToks and throwing the uniform up, it seems like a good sign. other good signs here. Rider Alliance, it is a unique case. Class of 26 wouldn't come until 27 because he would be going on an LDS mission for a year starting in January. So that would seem to lend itself toward BYU, right? There's a pretty strong connection with the religious faith there and the school, more so than I think with others that have religious affiliations. It matters a lot. He has a ton of family, including a dad that played football at BYU. I mentioned he already canceled the USC visit where his brother plays. Was reading in the Deseret News a column from Dick Harmon there, who said that sources were claiming he's not just there to chase the biggest NIL offer, which I guess you could look at that and say could be good, could be bad, because the BYU haters out there would say, well, they're just splashing money around like crazy. Like, ask a Baylor fan about that, right? With the Rob Wright situation. But you are competing against Oregon, who's going to have a lot of Nike money. And a kid that's, I think the real point here would be just a kid that's thinking about something more than just money. I think that's almost always going to play into BYU's favor, especially when they're somebody who is a member of the LDS church. Okay. There's even 4-star tight end commit. Brock Harris has been really helping out here. I believe BYU fans could correct me if I'm wrong here. I believe he was the other guy in the TikTok. If I had that correct, maybe not. And that's another guy who had an Oregon offer who chose BYU. Here's a little bit more from the Deseret News on this. Without talking specific NIL money up in the air for Lions, a consideration between BYU and Oregon is, quote, guaranteeing money, which means the financials will be there even if the star QB is injured and never plays a game. Injury liability is a factor in the upcoming decision. It will be interesting to see how BYU approaches this issue. Okay. But all this would seem to play into this thought idea that I've had for a while. Many others have as well, that like, hey, depending on how this house settlement thing goes and how fair market value is going to be actually adjudicated, BYU could be a real big player in the Big 12 here. And H.A. DeBonsta's already happened. You want to go back to like Igor Demin, basketball-wise, that was a big recruiting win. Like, BYU's been swimming in some really big-time waters when it comes to pulling in huge recruits. And this would be the latest. And, man, I don't know. A.J. DeBonsta, you're getting the number one player in the country. That's big, obviously. And basketball, you have a better chance at winning a national championship than you do in football. But, man, to pull off 5-star quarterback in football away from Dan Lanning in Oregon, to me, that feels harder than landing an A.J. DeBonsta, and is almost more significant in terms of trying to elevate your profile and prove like, hey, we are here to stay. Whatever this is going to look like in this new era of college football, we've got the resources and we've got coaches who are going to be aggressive and go pursue high-level talent like this, especially when we have a lot of built-in advantages. But DeBonsta, there were not the built-in advantages. They've proven they can do it really either way here. But Kalani Sitake's had to win with, talent that's not like this. And you go get a quarterback like that has real potential to lift that program quite a bit, which is already coming off an 11-win season. And it would also, I think the other thing that is significant to me about this is what it says about where it's at in the Brian Santiago era as the athletic director. Because a lot of what I was hearing around the time he was hired is like, hey, this guy played a really big role in what was happening with basketball NIL and stepping that up and keeping Kevin Young around, basically just getting the resources in place to make the basketball program what it is and give it the momentum that it has had. And so now if he's showing he can do this with football to facilitate to procure a 5-star quarterback like this all of a sudden, and one that could be some 24/7 sports analysts say is the best in the country. That's huge and should instill some confidence in where this athletic department is going to go with Santiago replacing an absolute legend in Tom Holmoe. So I don't know. To me, this was another one of those signs, just kind of like a little blinking light. Like, hey, man, like BYU's on the radar of being big time and maybe being the school or one of a school or a couple schools to really run this thing in the next 5 to 6 years. To me, like the next era of college athletics is like the next 6 years until we hit whatever the next wave is going to be of realignment when those TV deals are ending and we get there. You're talking about like the next, who knows when that will actually start? I guess I'll say 4 to 6 years. BYU's definitely on the scene and has the opportunity to be the top performer out of the league because of that. And we're seeing more and more evidence of it. This being one of those. For sure. I know I've seen like some talk in all of this, like, is it going to be a Bryce Underwood type of deal? Which, it seemed like that got way, way up there. He's the quarterback going to Michigan, who had been committed to LSU, but Michigan came in. Dave Portnoy from Barstool was like involved in the offer that they gave him. I don't know if it's getting quite to that level here. The part, that nugget from the Deseret News about like just guaranteed money as opposed to, maybe that's a new twist and turn that this takes, and you got to do something like that to get it locked down. But, without coming across like desperate or anything, I mean, this is one that like it's worth going all out to try and get, for all the reasons that I laid out there. What you're trying to do with your football program, man, you want to continue what happened last year, go get a 5-star quarterback, and then see the momentum that builds off of that too, right? I've sort of seen it at K-State, like the Avery Johnson effect. Dylan Edwards winds up coming back. You land Lincoln Cure, a 5-star tight end, then in the next recruiting class. Like it can have a kind of gravitational effect for your program. So something to watch out for. Now, could be all for naught. Maybe he'll choose Oregon on Tuesday, but I'm telling you, pay attention to this, people. Pay attention to what happens on Tuesday. Okay, Bennett. What's up, Bennett? Thank you for being here. Appreciate your contribution. Bennett says, Houston has a 5-star number 3 overall commit, and you have never devoted this much time for Keyshawn. I have not, and there are a couple of, well, first of all, one thing I want to say about that is that he is coached by Michael Bishop, who is my favorite athlete of all time, and I really appreciate that. If you wanted to really dig at me, you could hypothesize I haven't talked about it because I'm upset that Michael Bishop, the greatest, for my money, the greatest player in K-State football history, did not push him to K-State. Like, come on, man. But look, Willie Fritz was Michael Bishop's JUCO coach. So I can't be that mad. Willie Fritz is also a great dude. Here's the thing, Keyshawn, like BYU is in much more position right now to just where the football program is at. To have a player like this, I think, elevate them to being a legitimate Big 12 contender. Like, nothing against Houston. I think Willie Fritz is a great coach. I think he will continue working the Houston program toward respectability and then potentially beyond. But I think you got a couple of steps to get to where BYU's at. I also don't think Houston has the general resources to consistently be at the top of the league. That's been a problem, bit of a struggle. I think it's going to, like, we'll see how Houston handles the rev share era. I have some real question marks about how that goes. Some of this is, I mean, your defensive coordinator, who was a stud, got money whipped away by Texas Tech just this offseason. So there's not as much of like a gravitational pull around the Houston program as there is with BYU. I think he's a great player. The other thing, and this is just, if we're going to be totally honest about this, Josh Pate, I think it was the last show I was mentioning the Iowa State fan that was Jack Trice Mafia, maybe, who called him out on Twitter and was going back and forth about not talking about the Big 12 enough. And I said, look, I'll cut him a little bit of slack because we do, in content creators, like making content, you make content that people want to see. And there is a larger contingent of BYU fans out there that are extremely passionate that watch the content. And so you lean into that a little bit, but especially at a time when BYU really is in the midst of this, what feels like a transformational period within their athletics department and an incredible run of success that they have had. So look, I would say this about Houston, like your picture is Kelvin Sampson. I mean, Houston basketball, I talked a lot of Houston basketball and the overall importance of their run to the Big 12 when that was going on, and we were not really talking about much else. So that carried a lot of airtime when appropriate. So hey, if Houston wins double-digit games with said 5-star quarterback, then we'll talk a lot about it. But it's got to be earned on the field first. That would be my answer. But I appreciate it. And hey, if you keep bugging me to talk about it more, if you get more Houston fans to watch, if you get that content to rate well, I'll say rate well, but that's a really weird way to say it, then you'll get more coverage of it. But Houston just needs to become more of a factor. I love Willie Fritz. I'm going to aim to interview him again at Big 12 Media Days coming up very soon. So hope to see that, and I can ask him. Yeah, I guess can I? I don't know. Does the NCAA still have rules at this point anymore? I was going to say, I mean, the rule's always been you can't talk about a recruit until you actually have him signed. But like, I don't. Does the NCAA enforce any of that anymore? Do we care anymore? I guess they do because Dion got in trouble for it last year with Julian Lewis on his radio show. So, okay, I can't ask him specifically about that. I can ask him about Michael Bishop, though. Anyway, Bennett, thank you for being here. I appreciate your contribution to the channel, my friend. Rise and Shout. Great work, John. Thanks for everything. Appreciate you, Rise and Shout. Thank you for being here. And appreciate everybody like Rise and Shout who supported tonight or just showed up. If you click the like button, if you clicked the subscribe button, I greatly, greatly appreciate that. Everybody who does that, make sure you are signed up for the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter, ofbnews.com, to join 4,400 plus other Big 12 fans who are totally free, straight to your inbox twice a week. I highly recommend it. Breaking down all the big stories for you and what it means for the Big 12. Okay. Boy, Bennett, that's a little bit harsh, man. It's a little bit harsh. Bennett, I would love a breakdown. Give me a breakdown. Give me a breakdown on Ryder Lyons. Give me a breakdown on him and why it's nothing to drool over. I know that this is just a little back and forth going on in the chat, but that seems a little harsh to the kid. I think he's a pretty damn good prospect. If Dan Lanning wants him to play quarterback at his school, I think he's a pretty good prospect. Okay. Thank you all for being here. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. I know, is this NBA game worth watching, man? I saw Tyrese Halliburton got hurt, which really sucks. Best wishes to Tyrese Halliburton, who is an immensely fun player to watch. Damn it, it's a 19-point game in the fourth quarter. All right. So probably not going to be much to watch. Congratulations to any OKC Thunder fans out there. All right. Take care, guys. I will talk to you soon. Take care.